I am a private detective specializing in catching cheaters. Ask me anything. I am 27 years old. I've been working in this field for about a year. Mostly I expose unfaithful spouses, as the title suggests, but I also take on cases involving parental negligence and sometimes workplace fraud. Am I right in understanding that almost everyone who suspects their spouse of cheating turns out to be correct? Or do you often have to investigate cases where, in the end, there's no evidence of infidelity at all? It's actually the opposite. In only approximately 25% of cases do I actually manage to uncover something useful. More often than not, I follow someone for several days and they do not do anything suspicious at all. Of course, the client still pays me, so you're just a bad detective. I see. Haha, well yeah man, of course, I literally never take my eyes off the subject no matter where they go or what they do. But I can't fake evidence if there simply isn't any. Has it ever happened that someone wasn't cheating but was doing something strange or ridiculous, hiding it from their partner? Oh, great question. Unfortunately, nothing too crazy ever happened. Most often, people just go out for drinks with friends. There were times when I was almost sure the person was hiding something, but I could never prove anything. For example, one husband told his wife that he had a doctor's appointment at 5 in the morning. I thought that was nonsense. I followed him and he really did go to the doctor and then went straight to work. Let me clarify for you, he was sleeping with the doctor. Maybe, but the doctor was actually seeing patients and there were other people there. Have there been cases where the cheater turned out to be with someone of the opposite sex, which came as a surprise? Well, for example, a husband suspects his wife of cheating, but she's actually cheating with a woman. There was one time when something like that happened, but there wasn't 100% proof that they were in a romantic relationship, although it certainly looked that way. Who cheats more often, men or women? Honestly, it's about equal. But female clients are much more likely to be wrong in their suspicions. I've followed many men many times who weren't actually doing anything wrong at all. I'm curious, what's the most unusual place where you've caught a cheater? What's the greatest distance someone has traveled just for an affair? And doesn't this kind of work make you feel pessimistic about relationships in general? I haven't really encountered any truly unusual places in my practice yet. It's all pretty typical. Restaurants, bars, hotels, sometimes open areas. It depends on the time of year. The greatest distance was covered by a lawyer who resided 4 hours away and came to my city, ostensibly for the purpose of a business conference. Her husband hired us because he didn't believe the conference was real and suspected that she was meeting with a colleague whom she insisted wouldn't be there. And the conference turned out to be real, but I quickly caught them together. I can't say that I personally feel pessimistic, but it does make me feel a bit sad for society as a whole. Recently, I got engaged myself to an amazing woman whom I trust 100%. My work frequently leaves me feeling deeply grateful for my own good fortune, and somewhat melancholy when I realize just how infrequently other people happen to find themselves so fortunate. He is someone whom I trust 100% after 6 background checks and 86 weeks of surveillance. We met before I even started this job, to be honest. That lawyer who came to your city for a conference. How did you track her down? Did you literally follow her from the airport to the hotel? And how did you prove there was something going on between her and her colleague? She drove in by car. I knew which hotel she was staying at, so I waited for her there. After she arrived and checked in, that very colleague, the one you're not supposed to worry about, showed up separately. I sat in the lobby until they came down together, just as I expected. Then they spent the whole night at the hotel bar. You managed to photograph them at every stage. What camera did you use? My phone camera. Mostly, I took selfies over my shoulder, pretending I was just photographing myself while they were in the background. Can you discuss some of the subtle signs of cheating that people frequently tend to overlook? Usually they take overly paranoid measures to maintain their secrecy, and in the end, they just make complete fools of themselves. For example, one guy came to a restaurant with his mistress, and I watched them from the parking lot. They immediately headed off in different directions, and neither of them parked right by the restaurant. Both parked in a large parking lot nearby, but at completely opposite ends. I think his wife will find this video amusing to watch. Tell us about your fastest case, from the moment you were hired to when you gathered enough evidence of infidelity, and about your longest case. Also, how long do you usually work on a case before deciding that it's not going to lead anywhere? There have been times when everything happened on the very same day. In most cases, we're contracted to perform 10 to 20 hours of surveillance distributed across a period of 1 or 2 weeks. We get paid in advance, so we use all the allotted time, even if it seems like the case is not making any real progress. Sometimes people just need a sense of peace of mind, and the longer we keep track of and document the partner's behavior, the more confident the client becomes that there's no infidelity. How often do you actually get clients who are convinced their spouse is cheating? But in reality, that's just not the case at the end of the day. My ex was ready to bet her soul. She was so sure I was cheating on her. She constantly accused me of it, even though I was never unfaithful to her. It's much harder than it seems. it's incredibly difficult to prove your innocence to someone who's already completely lost their sense of reason. In most cases, our client is simply mistaken in their beliefs, and that's even after we weed out the obviously hopeless cases and refuse to take them. It doesn't happen often, but it's a truly incredible and rewarding feeling when you actually catch someone red-handed. Do you need some kind of special license to be a private detective? I assume you went to college. It probably also depends on the state. And where is your office? Do you work from home or somewhere else? We don't have a physical office. I do all the prep work from home. I have a degree, but it's not required for this job. In my state, you need 3 years of experience to get a license. So for now, I work under my boss's license. Once the time is up, I'll be able to apply for my own. There have been times when I had to spend quite a bit just to avoid looking suspicious. For example, buying a drink, booking a hotel room, or taking a taxi. If so, does your boss cover those kinds of expenses? Usually, I'll get a drink or a snack at the restaurant. I've also had to buy tickets to get into an event. All of that gets reimbursed as long as I keep the receipt. Back when I was working as a waiter, I once happened to serve a private detective who was sitting at one of my tables. He paid me $20 for each thing I could help him with while he was surveilling a guy. He gave me $20 just for his tab, and another $20 for a photo of the guy by the beer fridge. And he also left me a $20 tip for the 1 glass of beer he drank. It was nice. If he'd been one of our loyal regular customers, I wouldn't have taken his money. But he was being a jerk, so I agreed. What specific kind of evidence do you collect to make sure you win the case for your client? It's pretty simple. I secretly take photos of what the subject is doing. And if the pictures show them behaving inappropriately, the client is satisfied. I don't take part in court proceedings, I just gather the materials. In this day and age, you nearly always have to testify in court for it to be accepted as evidence, especially when you consider the spread of deepfakes and AI. All my photos have automatically embedded GPS tags and timestamps. I am a federal prosecutor in the United States. You could very well be subpoenaed to court if it hasn't happened already. In your field, that's quite to be expected. In general, for a photograph to be accepted as evidence, a witness who was personally present at the event, in this case you, is required to confirm that the photo truly reflects what happened. GPS tags and timestamps help, but by themselves they're not enough. I don't mind testifying in court. What does your standard professional spy kit typically consist of? And how much time do you spend actually sitting inside of your car compared to having to be in public places and blending in? It's a very basic set. A digital camera, binoculars, a few changes of clothes, and a camera app with a timestamp on my phone for close-up shots. I always start a case from the car, and then it all depends on where the subject goes. If they go into a place, I have to find a way to get inside. That's so cool. Do you have to carry a wad of cash with you to tip staff, informants, and so on, or is everything handled through Venmo now? Do you carry a weapon on you? Cash is king. If you need to leave quickly, you can just leave the money on the table. I don't slip anyone anything and I don't carry a weapon. I shouldn't place myself in a compromising situation where I would ever need one. Have you ever been caught in the act or at least suspected by the people you were following? I've never cheated myself, but I had a very suspicious partner, and after we broke up, I discovered the truth that she was the one cheating. I think if someone was tailing her, she would just yell at them, LOL. No, I've never been caught because I'm very careful. The hardest thing is to follow someone by car. Because of traffic, it's easy to get busted. If I feel like I might get noticed, I just leave and try again another day. If you get caught, that's it, the case is over. The main thing in this job is patience. How did you get into this profession? I left the army without any plan at all. I came across a job posting on Indeed, LOL. The owner of the agency turned out to be a veteran too. We hit it off quickly and now I'm kind of his right-hand man. What can help an especially sneaky cheater stay unnoticed? Just don't show up in public. I can't conduct surveillance where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. In almost every other place, you're being watched. Could you tell me a bit about cases involving workplace fraud? What did the accused do? One particular individual took family leave, but in reality, he was actually launching his own business. Another claimed he was unemployed and in a far too severe and unstable emotional state to work. He demanded compensation from his former employer, even though he had already found a new job. I'm curious, how did that case end? After all, according to the rules, a person can take on a side job during unpaid leave as long as the new job doesn't involve the same difficulties as the main one. It's a different matter if both positions are similar or if the employer outright forbids side jobs. In that case, of course, the situation is debatable. The guy said he was taking his mom to doctor's appointments, but in reality he was moonlighting as a tree feller. Sometimes you work in tandem with the client. Well, for example, if a wife installs a GPS tracker in her husband's car, can you use that data for surveillance? Sometimes that happens, and it can be very helpful. First question, have you ever had to get into a fight with the person you were surveilling or with a passerby who realized you were following someone? Second, you mentioned that about 25% of the people you observe are actually engaging in cheating, or I mean people. Do you need to have very strong suspicions of sexual contact to consider it cheating? Have there been cases where things turned out to be more complicated than just physical infidelity or a full-fledged mistress? Third, have you ever managed to find out exactly who that other person was? It seems to me that most often it's former partners. Am I right? I've already written about this, but no, there haven't been any fights. I'm careful and try not to get caught. The client or the court decides what counts as cheating, not me. My job is not to judge, but to gather facts. In the vast majority of these cases, it's not even just a brief fling, but fully developed parallel relationships. And of course, I cannot definitively prove the fact of intimacy itself. Usually I just try to gather some basic background information about the other person to figure out exactly where and when they might meet again. And how do you find clients? Do you advertise your services somewhere, or is it all just word of mouth? I work at a small firm. The owner handles the business side, and I just focus on surveillance. But in the future, I want to learn that side of the business as well. Do you have any touching stories where a spouse suspected infidelity, but it turned out to be completely innocent? There was this one guy who went to a spa hotel for an overnight stay and ended up being there alone. He just wanted some peace and quiet to relax. Great thread. It seems like people have watched too many TV shows and imagine that everyone is constantly tracking who's around them. In reality, a private detective just blends into the surroundings while everyone else goes about their business. If you're not a criminal or a cop, chances are you won't even realize you're being watched at all, especially if the detective only operates in places where no one expects any personal space. Question: how do cheaters behave in public with their lovers? Do they get nervous or stay relaxed? Absolutely spot on, man. Most people don't notice what's going on around them at all. That only works to my advantage. The average person doesn't pay attention to their surroundings. Let me answer the question. Usually they act pretty relaxed and calm. But as I mentioned before, some people end up doing incredibly foolish things like parking at completely opposite ends of the same street before meeting up. And what was your funniest situation? One woman hired us because her husband was a total lazy bum who never did anything at all. She wanted to kick him out of the house. On the day I started watching him, he told his wife that he had gotten a new job and was heading there. I tailed him. In the end, the guy went to a liquor store and a weed shop as soon as they opened. How do you personally feel about the ethical side of your work? Do you think it's okay to spy on people? Everything that I record happens in public, so it's all fair game, but I'll be honest, I am really glad I work privately and not for the government. Has it ever been hard for you to show the client the evidence you've gathered? Every time I catch someone cheating, of course, it is an unpleasant and difficult situation. In Canada, I was told that private detectives are required to notify the local police if they're conducting surveillance on someone. I am not entirely certain if this applies to every single possible case or only to those involving personal injury claims. Do you happen to have such a requirement, and has law enforcement ever been called on you? I always make sure to notify the local authorities in advance if I plan to stay somewhere for a considerable period of time. Your clients always trust your findings when you show them the undeniable evidence. It's virtually impossible to refute a photo or video where someone is clearly hugging, kissing, or holding hands with another person. How can you tell if someone is following you? I don't know. After all, I've never been caught. What kind of assignments have you had in cases of child neglect? One man hired us to help him regain custody of his children from his ex-wife. He claimed that she was drinking and behaving inappropriately. I followed her and the kids to a bowling club. She got out and left the driver's side door of the car open. The whole time she was inside, the door stayed open. Wait, that's the one specific part I didn't understand from the whole discussion thread. Is simply forgetting to close the door really enough evidence to prove that someone is a drunk and incapable of taking care of their kids? Or did I misunderstand something? By itself, it's not sufficient evidence, but it helped confirm a pattern of behavior that the client had been documenting for a long time. Shouldn't you have called the police for the children's safety? Instead of just standing there watching her? No, leaving the door open by itself isn't a reason to call the police. That day, I watched closely to make sure no one tried to steal anything from the car. I would have called the police if something like that had happened. No question, but I've always wondered if a private investigator was ever watching me. I had a serious shoulder injury at work, I couldn't work and was applying for compensation. One day, a dark gray van followed me the entire day. I'm attentive to my surroundings, so I was sure it was the same vehicle and the same person. He was wearing a hat, and I even managed to catch up to him and write down the license plate number. I carry a weapon with me, but I didn't want to get into a conflict, so I called the police. They caught him and let him go without really explaining anything. It seems like he's just really bad at his job. What was the most successful result you managed to achieve after long hours of waiting? I knew the guy was somewhere in the city, in a bar, but I didn't know which one exactly. I checked almost every single one of the bars and was just about to give up, but then I finally spotted him with a girl in the very last place I checked. Have you ever gone into someone's hotel room to secretly install cameras or microphones? Have you ever bribed receptionists to obtain detailed information about check-ins, keys, or room numbers? Have you ever obtained footage from the establishment's security cameras to help with a private case? Probably read too many cheap novels. All of that is illegal, except for requesting external video footage. What have you learned about yourself thanks to this job? I'm capable of being much more patient than I thought before. Have you ever slept with someone you were hired to follow? Lol, no. How exactly would you react if the person you were following suddenly happened to be an undercover cop working on an active investigation? Most likely, I'd report it to the authorities, lol. How do people even find a private detective, especially if they need someone in another city or state? Do you need to know the reason why someone is being hired? Or do you just gather what you can and report back? We have a website and so on, but mostly it's through word of mouth. Yes, we thoroughly vet clients to make sure our services aren't being used for bad purposes. Has it ever happened that the person accusing their partner of cheating turned out to be the one cheating themselves? That's impossible to determine for certain, unless someone else hires us to follow them. How much do you make per case or per day? This isn't my main job. I only do this occasionally. But my rate is $40 per hour from the very moment I leave home until I return. Do you have any special equipment so it's not obvious when you're actually taking the photos? Hidden cameras, telephoto lenses, remote cameras, a digital camera with a telescopic lens for long-distance shots. If I'm in a restaurant, I usually turn on video on my phone and pretend I'm talking on it, or I put it in my shirt pocket so that the camera just barely sticks out. Of course, you're a professional, but I have an idea. Have you ever tried glasses with a small camera in the frame, like Ray-Ban Meta? For now, I still do things the old-fashioned way, but I'm thinking about expanding my toolkit, so that's a good idea. What do you do at work that I wouldn't think of? Besides sitting in a car with a camera and binoculars, for example, but that's mostly what my job entails. But if someone decides to enter a building, I have to discreetly get myself into the ideal position. Is it possible to put a GPS tracker on the suspect's car? Is that legal? No, but if the spouse installs the tracker themselves, they can pass the data on to me. How profitable is this profession for you, and on average in general, if you convert it to a monthly salary? Do you know how much your boss makes, and what are your long-term goals? I love the series of books about the Los Angeles detective Easy Rollins. There are 17 novels in it. I really want to try myself in this field someday. Sorry for all the questions, but I'd appreciate any advice. So far, my career is going really well, but I still have a lot more to learn. I don't know exactly what percentage my boss takes, but what he pays me is more than generous and fair. In the long term, in a few years, I'd like to open my own agency or take a higher position at my current one, to get a handle on the business side of things. My boss fully supports this. How do you manage not to get caught when you're tailing someone on foot? Do you hide behind a wall and peek around the corner like in cartoons? The best way not to get caught is to stay in plain sight. Yes, sometimes you do have to hide, but that's risky. Has it ever happened that both partners in a couple hired you separately without knowing the other did the same? No, that hasn't happened yet. You're 27 and you've only been doing this for a year. First, what kind of professional training do you have? Second, do you consider yourself an expert? Third, do you plan to stay in this profession for a long time? First, I was an officer in the army. Second, I'm a professional, yes, but not yet an expert. Third, I'm thinking about it very seriously. How do you handle the heat when it's nearly 40 degrees outside and you have to sit in a car for hours doing surveillance? Extreme heat and cold are the hardest parts of the job. Usually, every hour I start the car for about 5 minutes to turn on the air conditioning or the heater, and then I live off that reserve. This year, I somehow managed to work a whole day at minus 20 degrees. Are you often hired by parents who are sharing custody to investigate how the other parent behaves? And how does it usually end? Yes, quite often, but I'm not involved in the case enough to know how it ends. How much of your work can be done at home on the computer, and how much is out in the field? I'm not really a computer person at all. I'm always working out in the field. Are private detectives ever hired just to intimidate someone? I had a friend from college, a big guy, a football player. He said he was dispatched to various bars and clubs to frighten and intimidate people whom jealous partners suspected of cheating. He also mentioned that he was sometimes assigned to just sit in a car outside the homes of people who owed money and look visibly threatening. That kind of attention is exactly the opposite of what I'm aiming for. And how do you even find out where someone is headed? For example, if he's going to a bar with friends, how do you figure that out? Does he post his location on social media himself? Usually the client tells me everything they know. Sometimes the person sticks to a usual routine, and sometimes it's a one-time event and the client wants to know who they went there with. There are times when there's almost no information and then the job gets harder. Do your family and friends know that you work as a private detective? Yes, it's not a secret job. I just don't share the details of the cases. What are some red flags that indicate a case or a client is not suitable? And what signs, on the contrary, show that a case is suitable and you should take it? Usually these are cases of obvious schizophrenia. We can recognize those pretty quickly. What was your longest workday? About 20 hours? If it was longer, did you ever have to sleep on the job to catch evidence in the morning after the person finished their business? And what was the shortest one? Have you ever been in dangerous situations where you just told yourself, nope, I'll come back later? How does your wife feel about your job? Does she trust you if, for example, you work 15 long hours in a row? Do you ever grow weary of this demanding lifestyle and feel like you desperately need to take a break? The longest surveillance lasted about 12 hours straight, but when I go out, I never really know for certain in advance how long the job will take. It might be over in an hour, or it could drag on all day. The shortest was 45 minutes. The guy ended up at a bar literally a couple of blocks from my house. I just walked there on foot. Of course, it's not as stable as a regular 9-to-5 job, but my wife fully supports me. My sleep schedule is very irregular. One case might start at 4 in the morning, another at 11 at night. I have a friend who did the same thing after college, catching cheaters and investigating insurance fraud. For example, when someone takes time off for an injury but is actually fixing the roof of their house. You said you've been in this business for about a year. Has your attitude toward people changed? Do you trust people less now? My friend quit after 3 years. He said he became too cynical for his age. I've definitely become more attentive to my surroundings, which I see as a plus, but I haven't become cynical. Not yet. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment below the video with your thoughts about the hero of our thread, and don't forget to check out our other videos. See you tomorrow. Hugs. Bye.